Went here. Another Second American Revolution blog. We're going to follow up on the demise of the Republic, or you might say the metamorphosis of the Republic. One of the things to keep in mind to sort of understand what's going on here is an idea that we spoke about a little earlier, but now we're going to get into sort of certain realities of it, which is that with the metamorphosis of civilization, the older hierarchical forms of structure are dying. They're not helpful anymore. They're not vital. We can't really get things done through them. Doesn't make any difference whether it's a hierarchical structure of such a place as the Roman Catholic Church or the Mormon Church, or the hierarchical structure of a corporation, or the hierarchical structure of a government, or of a university. All of these things are kind of old in a way and don't really work, which is why they have the problems that they have. On the other side of the metamorphosis, things are going to be more vital from the bottom, from what I call the social commons. And so when I talk about the need to write a second American Constitution, which I think we can actually accomplish, but we just can't hurry it. You know, you can't make something like that happen all that fast. But nonetheless, let's take a look at the situation and try to get a grip on the dynamics, the underlying dynamics. Now, we talked about this a little bit in an earlier video, and I want to go through it again because it's very important to see these sort of very ordinary relationships that we understand and recognize what happens if we take up the task of writing a new constitution, and especially if we take it up as a long-term task. Like, we're not going to run out in the next couple of years and do it. There's processes that have to happen first. So what's that going to look like? Well, to get a good idea of what it ought to look like in a way, let's remember something that we talked about before. The politician decides to run for office. Mostly he's ambitious. Maybe he's just running for re-election and he wants to keep getting his hits on his power drug. In any event, his decision to run for office puts him in a certain place where he has to engage in a kind of clever artfulness of deception, which is that he needs to hide his true character from the American people. And in order to do that, he needs the support of professionals in the media and advertising business who have become experts in political campaigns. Obama's just brought in an expert from when he won his campaign, and I guess we'll get more peace and hope and change rhetoric, but I don't suspect we're going to get much changes at the level of what the administration is doing. I don't think they have the cojones for it. In any event, the politician decides to run, then he brings in these people to run the campaign, and their job basically is to sell the politician. And they do this through polls, which we talked about recently. They do this through polls and push polls and focus groups, and basically what they do is they create this elaborate deception in the form of the advertising and the rhetoric in which the campaign is engaged. And because we have two political parties and the influence of those parties on the whole situation, we have a tendency for the rhetoric to be kind of, I wouldn't say exactly universal, but the parties will tend to try to align themselves and put forward the same ideas in order to carve out a territory that they think that they can maybe win an election on. And of course the purpose of this is to get voters emotionally involved. They really don't appeal to our reason. They would rather lie to us and give us false information and keep us confused and all kinds of things like that. If they appealed to our reason, they would produce a whole different kind of material for our consideration than they do. Now the Democrats and the Republicans, or the conservatives and the liberals, however you want to characterize them, and of course then there's some fringe groups, the Greens and the Libertarians and so forth, and each of these has basically an ideology of sorts that you could talk about. Their ideology is sometimes at odds with each other, and it's kind of funny the way the Republicans and the Democrats can sort of look at the same problem and make it seem really stupid. But they manage to do it, and we buy into it because we're so used to hearing these kinds of things that we think make some sense. And of course the conservatives say, less government, less government, less government, more freedom, more freedom, more freedom, especially for our corporations, more freedom. And the liberals say, no, no, we need more regulation, we need more government, we can't fix problems without regulation and government and spending and so on and so forth. And they seem to be at odds with each other. Now you could ask a really interesting question like we did when we talked about asking good questions with regard to polls. You could say, well, is this dialogue even about anything? I mean, is it about what makes good government? Do they ever actually talk about what government is and does in a kind of intelligent sense? There's a book I really like written by a conservative whose opinions of late I haven't had much use for, except on occasion, but George Will in the 80s wrote a wonderful book called Statecraft to Soulcraft, and I recommend it to people to read that book if they can get their hands on a copy. I also recommend to people that they read the opening couple of chapters in Barry Goldwater's The Conscience of a Conservative. Particularly liberals should read those two books because the conservatives have a lot of intelligence and wisdom. It's not just belonging to sort of the left. Anyway, so the politicians stir up, they get their guys going, they start to manufacture their elaborate lies, they go out and sell us these lies, and we sort of wander around doing the main thing. We raise the children, create the wealth, and all the stuff that we're supposed to do. And there we are sort of at the end of this long chain of things which comes toward us and says, believe us, eat our shit, eat our shit. And we do. We don't have really much time for anything else. Well, unfortunately, we've got to make time because by the very fact that the politician commits himself to this sort of control of the rhetoric of the campaign, his control of the language of the campaign, his use of the motions hooks in the campaign with the push polls and the focus groups and the like. By doing this, he binds himself, he creates a prison for himself because he connects himself to us and to language. And what we do is we push back on the same set of connections. And that's the thing that's going to happen when we get into creating the dialogues connected to the doing the second constitution. But my time is nearly up in a certain kind of way, because YouTube wants these short videos. So I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to quickly do another one, and I'll go on with what we do when we push back.